It's the Infinite Podcast. Go tell your friends. It's the Infinite Podcast. My God, it never ends. It's the Infinite Podcast with Rob and Cork the Kid.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Project Infinite Podcast, the podcast covering the infinite and ever-expanding multiverse of fandom, from movies, comics, TV shows, video games. We got you covered. I'm Rob. I'm here, as always, with Court. And Court, we are on the road to Deadpool 3. I almost said 2, but it's Deadpool 3. And we got, like, a little under a month.
Yeah, we're almost there. I mean, this movie, it's weird. This movie feels like I've been thinking about this coming out for, years upon years. I mean, when did we start to know about this movie? I think it was 2021. We knew that we were going to get a Deadpool. As soon as the rights went back to Marvel from all the Fox, we knew Deadpool 3 was going to be a thing. And I mean, the big red herring for this is when Wolverine was confirmed to not just be a cameo or a little character. No, this is a true buddy cop adventure through the multiverse. I'm assuming is what this is going to be about.
It feels that way, and I mean the biggest thing, I guess, and kind of leading into our topic today, because we're not doing a review, we're not doing anything like that. We're doing a tried and true, just a fun thing. And I guess a lot of people are saying it feels like a bit of an exaggeration, but we kind of latched onto this idea and are going to run with it, is that this idea that Deadpool and Wolverine might save the MCU. Feels a little drastic to me, but that's kind of what people are kind of pinning on it. And that's why our topic today, we are just going to kind of volley back and forth, just movies, TV shows, whatever the case is, that kind of quote unquote saved the franchise that they represented or you know, help launch, or whatever the case is. It's usually comes down to a singular project that can be traced, that, you know, kind of resurrects something or saves it, or whatever the case is. So that's what we're going to talk about. And then, yeah, we'll just throw a couple of those back and forth. And, you know, Deadpool is definitely in the zeitgeist. And that being said, with Deadpool, we do have a little bit of Deadpool news. A new clip has been released for Deadpool 3, and to nobody's surprise, it is confirmed now that Sabretooth is in this movie. The X-Men 1 version of Sabretooth, not the Liev Schreiber version.
Much to our dismay.
I mean,
it makes sense. This actually makes it's the perfect, because if you were to, you know, flip the coin and pick which one you want, or throw out the dartboard, you're going to pick obviously you're not going to pick Liev Schreiber. You got to do the funniest version. And this is the funniest version to pick.
The Mad Max version of Sabretooth.
Yeah, that really is the Mad Max version of Sabretooth.
He's got goggles on, the beard is all grown out, and looks like we're going to get a big Wolverine Sabretooth fight in this movie, which is neat, which is cool.
The fight choreography looks good.
Yeah.
From the trailers, it looks pretty decent.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll see what this is like the thing of, like, you know, if they're showing that, what are they kind of withholding from us, I think is also a neat point to kind of make. You know, I think, obviously, you got a Wolverine movie, I always have to pay homage to the Sabretooth stuff also, so I think that makes total sense. Definitely goes along with the idea that a bunch of Fox characters are going to pop up in this. Sure. Obviously, it's not just going to be Sabretooth, it's going to be Sabretooth and friends, I would expect.
Right, because we know Toad, we know Pyro's in this movie as well, too. I think there was one more that I can't remember who's also in there as well, too. So
I'm curious, though, if they're just going to stick with the Singer X-Men stuff.
I think that makes a lot more sense, because if they're going to do the classic X-Men, Hugh Jackman obviously has been Wolverine through and through. He's the only person that hasn't been replaced through this entire thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just stick with Singer's and kill all of them. I think would make the most sense.
Yeah, that I agree. And I think that, like, to your point, kind of like the First Class stuff feels a little bit like too blood, I guess. Is like you wouldn't want to, like, just kill off those characters for, like, a gag. You know what I mean? But, like, the X-Men, like the Singer X-Men, especially the Brotherhood of Mutants characters, are all kind of goofy. Like, you know, they're very of their time. Like, I think the heroic, like, the heroes in the Singer X-Men movies actually kind of hold up better over time, like the portrayals of those characters. Besides Magneto, but I feel like the villains in the Singer trilogy kind of come across a little bit more comic booky, so they fit kind of better in this style of movie than the First Class set of villains. I think the first class set of villains, it's really just, I mean, it's Magneto for most of it. Then like Apocalypse, like you're not gonna do that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like it's very like you could just do a bunch of Brotherhood of Mutants characters.
But also, I don't know who they're gonna use. That's what I keep thinking about. Like I don't know how far they're gonna take this. You do make a good point about it might be a little too niche to touch any of the newer X-Men because how they, I mean, for lack of a better term, crashed and burned out. But, you know, we saw the fully realized versions of, you know, the original OG Singer X-Men. So I wonder if they're going to double down, just use all of them. Like I said, Famke Janssen, Halle Berry, James Marsden, just kind of bring all of them in. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I wonder if they're actually going to do it. You know, and obviously we always say this about any of these types of projects, you know, just make sure your number one priority is story. That needs to be the number one story and character. It needs to be the number one priority. So
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So we'll see. We'll just stick right with the couple of Marvel things. So Fantastic Four, Kevin Feige has confirmed, obviously, you know, the marketing kind of gave this away, but this movie will be taking place in the 60s. Mm-hmm. It will be set in an alternate timeline, which again, we kind of figured, which makes total sense. And, you know, I think this movie's on a really great track. Joseph Quinn just had a really great performance in the Quiet Place prequel. I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet, but by all accounts, he and Lupita Nyong'o are really, really good. Mm-hmm. And I think he kind of needed that, mm-hmm. To be honest, because I feel like for some reason people were just not on board with him. Sure. I don't know why. I feel like he was like the star of the summer a few years ago when Stranger Things came out, and then all of a sudden people were just like not on board. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm glad that he apparently put up a really nice performance in this Quiet Place prequel, and looking forward to Fantastic Four. I think everything, you know, on the flip side of the Blade stuff that I'm about to get into, I think everything about this movie seems to be really promising.
Sure, because I know Joseph Quinn just said, and you know, obviously the actors are supposed to do this, but it was just something about the way he said it. He said this script is very, and I don't know.
Ralph Ineson also said.
Yeah. Really right, that was the one where Ralph. You know when Ralph Ineson says that you might be onto something, but both him and Joseph Quinn said this script is something. Like this is actually something that's pretty interesting and pretty cool. I think they're gonna get, you know, quasi experimental with the movie. I think it will be cool. You know, don't be afraid to dip into the, you know, the beautiful weirdness of what the Fantastic Four are. Be the multiverse hoppers. Be the, you know, the cosmic explorers. Do all things. Don't do the ultimate nullifier. That's too much of a. That might be the biggest that might be the biggest ex machina in comic history. Is besides Superman himself, is just the ultimate nullifier is crazy.
Yeah, it's an insane, insane weapon. It's a Galactus killing weapon.
It is. So,
you know what?
Do the Galactus killing kind.
Do the ultimate nullifier. Actually,
they gotta recreate the scene from Infinity War. He said, "What kind of weapon?" Johnny's got to be like, "What kind of weapon is this, Reed?" The Galactus killing kind.
But no, I think, you know, like I said, as opposed to the Blade stuff, I think everything around this movie is really encouraging. Obviously, from the casting to the setting to it just screams that like we're like you kind of said, like it does have like an experimental feel to it. Like we're just gonna try some stuff with this movie, and I think that's a great idea. I think historically with the Marvel movies, like, you know, dating back, I'm gonna step on what I'm gonna talk about in a little bit, but stepping back to even like Iron Man, like there was an experimental nature to mm-hmm. Iron Man, and then obviously Guardians of the Galaxy had that as well. Like just try some stuff, mm-hmm. and you know, don't be afraid to step outside the box a little bit. I think.
Yeah. And I agree with the, you know, pulling characters from, you know, where they came from as well too. I think Tobey Maguire Spider-Man does this well. I know it's still the early 2000s to the mid 2000s where he's operating, but there's this homage-ish feel to the 60s, and you know, placing them in the actual 60s I think is a great idea. And everybody relax. They're going to end up in the main MCU at some point.
Yeah, of course.
They're going to end up there in the present time. Whatever Earth they're on is probably back in the 60s, and you know, they're going to jump to the present day at some point. Everybody calm down. But I actually want to supersede and jump to the Superman stuff, because talking about, you know, a transition from talking about characters in the 60s and not just them being in the 60s, but the feel. There's this nostalgic feel almost to them being in their current time. And I think this Superman movie, every time I see something about this movie, I get more comfortable and more hopeful about what we're about to get out of this.
Yeah, I agree. We got some set photos of some characters. Obviously, Superman is the first one. The suit, first and foremost, looks obviously, I think we actually said this, that it was going to look different than that promo image, and it does. It looks much more colorful, it looks much more blue.
Yep.
It has the yellow shields on the back, on the cape. He's got the underpants on the outside. And it just looks really, really good. We saw, what else? Who else did we see in this?
Mr. Terrific is the other big one. That we saw.
It looks outstanding.
Yeah, it looks incredible. It looks very accurate, but I forgot who said it. It might have been you that saw it and told me, but it's almost like, it's like the Scooby-Doo approach where it's not him adapting the characters. It's as if he was taking the characters out of the comic and putting it into a movie. That's kind of the feel I'm getting out of this. And down to like, you know, Perry White to Lois Lane to Jimmy Olsen, like all of them. They all look like, if I were to pick up a Superman comic and then look at these set photos, they understand what they're doing. 100%.
I 100% agree with that. And I just, you know, even down to, we also saw a look at David Cornsweet as Clark Kent, and he looks vastly different as Clark Kent as he does as Superman, which I think isn't super important, because I think the kind of the gag behind like the Clark Kent moniker is his mannerisms as Clark Kent is kind of what hides it.
Right.
I mean, we've seen, you know, Christopher Reeve obviously did that spectacularly. I think of the modern Superman, Tyler Hoechlin probably does it the best.
Yeah, and I love how he also, there's like the whipped cream on top for Tyler Hoechlin is putting the dad spin on it a little bit. I think that helps him out a little bit. Like, I'm just this, you know, normal dad from the Midwest, and, you know, also I'm the most important man on the planet too. So
yeah, so I think James Gunn understands that idea too. So I'm curious at how David Cornsweet plays the dichotomy. I think it'll be really, really good. We saw some Cat Grant, we saw some Brooke Tessmacher, and we saw some Lois Lane. And like you said, I think, you know, all these characters just look like to your point, were kind of ripped out of a comic book. Like they don't look kind of, you know, I don't want to say like Snyder-fied,
right.
But they don't, you know, everything is very vibrant. All the colors are very purposeful. And I'm just, you know, the set photos are coming. So that means, you know, other things aren't going to be far behind, you know, within the next few months.
Right.
So,
and I was kicking around through, you know, different James Gunn projects as well. I was kicking around the Guardians movies. I was kicking around, and I just put on Guardians 3, and then and then I put on Peacemaker, the Suicide Squad, and the more you watch and you get to something like this, you know, any naysayer that's out here, I can't get behind any non-hopeful nature or feel. Like, I keep saying it, and it's something that I said when the Batman was coming out, there's just something about this movie that I can't explain what it is, but I just have an overwhelmingly good feel about it. It feels right. You know what I mean? It feels correct. Like, it feels like this is what, you know, what Superman could and should be.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And then just, I mean, the other thing that I was going to say about Marvel with Blade was that Delroy Lindo is officially out. You know, that was one of the castings that when we heard it, we were like, oh, nice.
Right.
Like, this is really great. And then, you know, I mean, I can't say I blame him. This movie's been in development hell now for 4 years.
Yeah, and especially an older actor with the repertoire that he has, you know, somebody like him could have been like, I see what you guys have done in the past, and I don't understand why this is the one that's... It's something I said last week. I don't know why this is the one that's getting stuck in the mud like this. I mean, you have multiple Oscar... Like, you have a Oscar winner, you have Oscar nominees, you have this personnel around you, and you just can't figure this one out of all the movies and all the TV shows, all the projects that you're working on. This is the one that doesn't work out. Just something's not right. Something's not sitting right about this project. So I wonder if it's a massive miscommunication that just boiled over into, you know, Project Dismay and Demise. I don't know if it's something that's simple. I don't know if it's disagreement, because I know Mahershala Ali had a lot of creative control over this project, and I wonder if, you know, Marvel stepped in and said, no, we're going to do our thing that we normally do, and he was like, no, I want control over this, you know, so.
Yeah, it just feels like it's one of those things that it's just, you know, getting thrown back to the drawing board, like from stage one, and you know, can't begrudge anyone for not wanting to be a part of that, but at the same time, you know, who knows, maybe it will be the best thing for it at the end of the day.
Yeah. And even Mia Goth's obviously been doing her press for Maxine, and when they were at the premiere and they asked her, like, even that got me concerned, just the way she said it. It's just like there's no active nature, and again, that's another person who's been extremely hot over the last couple of years, and this personnel you have on this film, you can't figure it out. It's just like this might have. When we were talking about the Blade cast, we said this cast is incredible, especially after we found out Mia Goth got added onto it too. We're like, this is an incredible cast, and a lot of times simplicity is your best friend, and I feel like there's something overly complicated about this production when I don't think it needs to be. And obviously that just starts with the script. So something might be battling each other. It might be people, it might be the project and a person. So we shall see.
We shall see, indeed. What else we got? Dune. So Dune, some Dune news. So
this is the Denis Villeneuve corner.
Yeah, after Dune 2 came out, kind of like the trek for what his next few years were going to look like, what he was going to do another thing, and then he was going to do Dune Messiah.
Yes.
And now that has changed. So Dune Messiah will indeed be Denis Villeneuve's next film.
I do genuinely think he was going to do, because I thought he was going to do Rendezvous with Rama or Cleopatra, so he can kind of, do a biopic kind of, a little bit calmer. And then they saw the returns on Dune 2, and they were like, no.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. They're like, actually, no. we love you, but
we love you, but no.
Make us another one of these, please.
Yeah, hey, your buddy Greg, and let's make another one.
So I think that's pretty much what happened. And I think probably even he's probably riding that momentum also. Like, he's probably very enveloped in this universe and this world and these characters and the script, and he's probably like, you know what? Let's just do it. Like, let me just finish this off. Let me just do my trilogy. Like, and then I have the rest of my life to do all my other projects that I can do. But if I stick the landing with this third movie, you got a case that this is one of the best film trilogies of all time, and because just do that.
What are you battling with? You're battling with
Lord of the Rings, Star
Wars, the original trilogy. I'm talking a very huge maybe to the Dark Knight trilogy. Yeah, but I think the second one holds it up. And I mean, if you want to talk about it that way, we'll see after Messiah comes out if the second one is truthfully the best one. Because I think Lord of the Rings is the only one that breaks that, because Godfather has that thing. I mean, if you want to compare trilogies, this well, obviously we have to see what Messiah brings. But just talking broad spectrum for Denis himself, I mean, he's got 4 projects that are confirmed now out of that. So obviously Dune Part 3 or Dune Messiah is the big one. Obviously for all of our sci-fi friends out there, Rendezvous with Rama, something that he knew, that's something he wanted to do for a long time in his life, is something that he's going to get. Cleopatra, I think that's a really cool one. I don't think he's attacked a biopic yet. I don't think, well, obviously, it's going to be, you can kind of bend a little bit more for something like this, but I don't think he's ever attacked a biopic yet. And he's also going to do, what is it? Nuclear War, a Scenario?
Yeah.
That's something that I'm actually pretty interested in.
Yeah.
A spiritual sequel to Oppenheimer.
Many are saying this, yeah. But yeah, no, I think it makes sense that, like I said, just, you don't have to put off, if you got the idea and you're ready to go, you might as well just do this. Like, he's already said, like, this is going to be the last Dune movie that he does, so you might as well just cap off the trilogy, and then, like I said, you got the whole rest of his career to make every other movie that he wants to make, so.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm in his corner of the structure that he wanted to do, like,
sure.
You remember I told you, I said, I want him to do, like, a dirty, disgusting movie, like, like Sicario or Prisoners again, but I just think of where he is, and I told you, my super, absolutely nuclear hot take is that, you go from Incendies to Prisoners to Enemy to Sicario to Arrival to Blade Runner to Dune Part 2 to Dune Part 3, and then you add these 3 on. I mean, you want to look at some of the greatest directors of all time. If he's able to operate on the same level that he is, like, his worst movie is, some people would dream to be his best, like, their best movie. Like, they would give anything to make a movie of whatever his worst movie would be. So, if he's able to land the 4 of these, which I think Dune Part 3 is going to land, obviously, the one I don't know why I think that Nuclear War Scenario might be a really good one. I have a good feeling about that. We might not get that movie for like 10 years the way he's operating, but who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Cleopatra, like I said, and somebody made a great point. Just have it be Zendaya. You already know her, and I think that could be a get Zendaya and her Oscar as well too. Get her first Oscar unless she wins it this year for Dune Part 2 at a supporting role. But for a main role, that would be awesome. And then the one I'm personally most excited for is Rendezvous with Rama. Like, give me the weirdest sci-fi movie that you can possibly imagine. My only stipulation is I need Greg Fraser. If Greg Fraser's there, then I'm there. So
yeah, I'm super excited for everything that he puts out. So, whatever and then obviously Dune Messiah is going to be probably, I think it could be kind of like that kind of the ending, like the ending that you want out of the trilogy. Like it could be, that the Dune version of Return of the King. Like I truly think it can be that, especially with what Part 2 is able to do.
Yeah, they're gonna have. I mean, spoilers for the book, but they're gonna have to ramp it a little bit because Messiah is. It's the old adage, like usually the end doesn't come with a bang; it comes with silence, and Messiah is a lot like that.
Yep.
I just think this is where you truthfully need to show your skill. With the pen or the computer, like you got to show your writing skills in something like this.
Yeah.
But I mean, after all the movies that I just said, I'm just gonna trust that he's able to do this. I have no. You could have asked me after Arrival, and I would have said give him whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah, I agree. And then last bit of news, some Star Wars news. So it is confirmed that Ben Mendelsohn will be returning for Andor season 2 as Krennic. That makes a ton of sense, especially since Andor season 2 is going to lead directly into Rogue One.
Right.
Diego Luna's already not so subtly hinted that you're going to see some Rogue One characters return. And he said Diego Luna actually made a point that I made when we talked about Andor, which he said it's going to be really cool for people to watch Andor season 2 and then revisit Rogue One.
Yes. Yep.
And I totally agree with that. I think that's ultimately like the best type of prequel when it recontextualizes the thing that it's prequeling.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing that it can do, and I think Andor season 1 did that really well for the character of Cassian Andor, and I think Andor season 2 will do that for the kind of wider scope of Rogue One.
Incredible point. I actually love that. That makes the most sense. It's just when you look at Andor season 1, it was such this personal odyssey, and for lack of a better term, it put the war in Star Wars, and what truthfully war is. War isn't battle after battle after battle. Oftentimes it's political war, and what the prequels couldn't contextualize out of that, Andor doubled down on that as well too. So for season 2 to kind of now we need to get the chips falling into place. So I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, I think Andor is one of the greatest things that Star Wars has ever produced, that Disney's ever produced. It's like that gem. It's just like Loki. It's like that gem that gets thrown in amongst everything that's going on currently. So whatever they want to do, and obviously we love Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah, and that's a character that obviously, again, much like kind of Cassian Andor in Rogue One, was a little undercooked, to be honest with you. And I think Andor season 1 did a great job of recontextualizing Cassian, and I think season 2 could do the same thing for Krennic, depending on how much Ben Mendelsohn's going to be involved.
I need to see him interact with Stellan Skarsgård as well too. I need that. I need it.
Mm-hmm. That would be super sick. I mean, season 1 did that really well, where they just threw 2 actors in a room and we're just like, go for it, fellas. Like, so I think season 2 can do a lot of that. And like I said, I'm really excited to see how it recontextualizes a lot of Rogue One. I'd be excited if they wanted to reintroduce Donnie Yen's character from Rogue One.
That would be interesting. I would really enjoy that. I think hopefully he'd be down for something like that as well too. I think that'd be really good. And again, to round out the world as well too. That's something I want to see more of like the war piece, and it's like how the Force users fit into this war piece, because it's almost like this. How to explain this? It's almost like this, this wild card essentially, and I want to see them start to dip into the, the bad half of the Force as well too. And how people like Donnie Yen's character are more of like, it's neutrality. Like I don't really have a, obviously I want good to come of all of this as well too. And and to some point he became a freedom fighter, but I want to see more of him.
And I also want to see, like, as it relates to the Force, and kind of Donnie Yen's character in Rogue One was kind of an avatar for this, like the Force as this religious sense, and instead of it being like the Force just being like the magic, but like the Force being like the actual religion that people follow.
And that makes so much sense on a show like this, where it's like, like I said, your political wars, like religion is a big piece of, a lot of times for war, religion gets staked into a lot of war. So I believe that using the, like your point, using the Force as a religion to add into this war would just be the perfect way to cap it off.
Because that's kind of what that character did in Rogue One. Like, everyone like kind of looked at him like he was a nut, and he was like, "Nah, you gotta trust in the Force. Like, the Force is with me. I'm with one with the Force." And like it's always like the thing, like, did the Force really protect him in that one sequence, or like was that just him? Like, that's religion in a nutshell. Like, is this really a divine power, or is this just the person believing in the divine power so much that they're able to rise above their own state?
Right.
And I think that's a really interesting part. And I think hopefully that's what season 2 does. Is, like I said, if everything that everyone's saying about it is that it's going to kind of recontextualize Rogue One, I think that would be super sick. Like I said, that's what the best prequels do. So short of that, let's talk some stuff. So yeah, like I said at the top, Deadpool 3 is being heralded as the MCU savior. I don't think it's quite that dire. I don't know where you stand on it, but I don't think the MCU necessarily needs like to be saved.
No, I mean, well, you know how I feel about the nostalgia aspect of things when nostalgia is used as a plot point, and I think that's a very extremely dangerous game to play. I guess I have the hot take about Spider-Man No Way Home, where I don't think that movie, especially the first half, doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a full movie. Like, it feels like the first half has something missing. Like, it feels very, I don't want to say the word cheap, but there's something that's not, it feels like there's something that's not real. And then that Sabretooth scene, I got the same feeling where it feels like there's something that's not, feels like there's something fake. Like, feels like there's something that's overtly artificial. And it's funny we talk about Andor and something like Loki, where like things like that feel like they're very real. Like, they feel like they're complete. And, it goes down to, the actual, what's the medium you're putting in this into? You're putting this into film and television. So it's, it's like some of them are doing the cinema and some of them are not, at the expense of nostalgia. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's more of a, I don't know if this is a full out save. Like, I'm not naive enough to believe that it's not, because you could just talk to people that have been fans of the MCU, and it feels like the only thing they're excited for is this. It feels like anything, they could have talked about anything. Even the Fantastic Four is not getting as much, and like, this is the one, because they already know what they're getting out of this.
I mean, to that point though, I think what would constitute a quote unquote save is if this movie garners enough well-being and kind of positive reception that it helps whatever the next project is. Like, Spider-Man No Way Home didn't do that.
Yep.
I don't even know what else to I mean, they've done the nostalgia bit a few times now, but like, I feel like, to me, like, what would constitute a save is whatever their next movie is. We don't even know what their next movie is after this.
Captain America.
Yeah. So I mean, what you would want is for Deadpool to be so good for it to not be like, oh, that was super cool that we got to see all these characters and Wolverine one more time, but like, also make me excited for the next thing. Like, I feel like that's what the early phases of Marvel did really well, where, after Iron Man, obviously people wanted to see the next Marvel thing because Iron Man was so good, but I think they did a really nice job of one to the next of like being like, okay, maybe, I don't know how Thor connects to Captain America, but I want to see Captain America because I quite like Thor. Thor was good, so I want to see the next thing. And I feel like that's kind of where you're seeing this oscillation of success and failure with the Marvel movies, like, in the last few years. Like, Guardians 3's success didn't translate to the Marvels. Right.
Exactly.
And that's the part that they have to solve. They have to figure out why is one, the sustainability MCU was built upon like one to the next, and everyone seeing everything. And we haven't seen that with this last kind of sect of movies. Like, it kind of worked for a little bit in the beginning.
Yep, 100%. And a big piece is, your uncontrollables too. Like, obviously the Jonathan Majors situation is an uncontrollable. Chadwick Boseman passing away is like, you have absolute uncontrollables that you can't plan for. But I think the issue that I had, and it's something that we say about, Chris Evans versus Anthony Mackie, is they wouldn't even have thought about having Chris Evans out of a movie for 5 years. And we haven't seen Anthony Mackie in a movie for 5 years. Like, that is just
he hasn't been in a movie since Endgame.
And I mean, I'll scream this till I'm blue in the face, but it's one of the biggest killers of the MCU at this point is that I don't feel like there's no main characters right now. There's nobody there was definitive main characters the entire Infinity Saga. So once they wanted in contention against any sort of villain, I also cared about that villain as well too. At this point, there's nobody to kind of, who am I following? I don't know there's too many paths. There's too many strands of people to follow as well too. And then again, a big piece is it is the drastic difference in quality. I mean, sometimes it is absolute night and day. I mean, you get something like Loki where the show looks good. It's written well. I care about all these characters, and that's to the help of the show and the writers as well too. But then I trick back and I look at Ant-Man Quantumanium or Thor: Love and Thunder, and I say, how are you comfortable giving this movie to the studio and being like, and how is the studio comfortable being like, yeah, this is what we're going to release? Like, something that's incohesive, that's, sometimes nonsensical. Like, why is there so much ebb and flow and, and so much, distance in between these projects in terms of quality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to that end, obviously, like I said, our topic today is going to be things that saved other things. Mm-hmm. Workshopping that a little bit. So like I said up top, like the gist of this is we're just going to kind of volley back and forth on some ideas of things that we feel kind of saved, whether it's a studio or a company or a concept. And I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start a little bit more broad instead of, because I know the original plan is we were going to talk about actual shows and movies, but I wanted to go a little bit more broad. So I'm going to start with John Wick saving action, especially, Western action, because Western action up until that point, and again, in the studios you were looking at, I mean, the MCU was a huge culprit of this as well, as the way your action was structured was very shaky cam, very quick cuts, and obviously the big heel turn for that was Jason Bourne. The Bourne movies were, and that was the point, and it fits for the Bourne movies, but it doesn't fit for everything. But everybody in Hollywood took that plan, and they said, we're all going to do this shaky cam, very tight, very long lenses you're going to throw on there too, very, very tight, a lot of cuts, like every cut imaginable you're going to use for something like this, to shield and mask. And then John Wick gets there and Chad Stahelski gets there, and, you're looking at this Western, action hero that is full hand-to-hand, like just full out hand-to-hand, not a lot of cuts. Like, you're going to see the action and if you feel it a little bit more. So whatever might lack in a script for something like John Wick makes up for some extra sell in the movie. So I think John Wick I don't think people realize how important John Wick was to modern movie making and modern action, because now it's to the point of, and it's something I say all the time, like, after 2014, if you're making an action movie, hey, let's call the John Wick guys. I feel like that happened in Hollywood a lot.
Yeah, I that's when you said that, I was like, wait, that's actually a really a really good call. I mean, that was and it was a movie that at the time didn't, wasn't really on the radar.
Yeah, it was just Keanu Reeves' like action star Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, they're like, wait, what is happening?
Right.
And I mean, by the same token, like in the same year as John Wick, you get the Equalizer.
Right.
Again, and the Equalizer, I enjoyed the Equalizer. Yeah. I think it's really good, but it also kind of, they're great parallels to one another as far as different type of action movie where like the Equalizer was kind of still, like, I feel like action movies had like phases.
Yeah.
And the phase that the Equalizer was in that same phase that I think like Taken launched, where it's like aging movie star, put him in an action thing, like against type, and just let him cook for an hour and a half. And, Taken kind of started that, and then the Equalizer kind of perfected it. But that kind of model was kind of becoming a little antiquated. Like, Liam Neeson kind of antiquated it himself by doing so many of them.
Right.
So John Wick was really this breath of fresh air because, on the surface level that it feels like a similar idea. Like, oh, Keanu Reeves is going to do like an action thing. And then you get to the actual action of John Wick and you're like, oh, this is elevated. Like, this is something different. And I think that's backed up by the fact that when we did John Wick 4, like, these movies are still, just the John Wick movies are still ascending. Like, like we're 4 movies in and each one you can argue is better than the last, which is kind of nutty.
And then if you just look at the action movies after John Wick comes out, I mean, a couple that I pulled from, I look at, what they were doing with the Bond movies after that, the action started to turn a little bit more, because Skyfall comes out in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, 2012,
2012, I think, yeah.
And obviously you have somebody like Roger Deakins and you have somebody like Sam Mendes to direct and shoot your movie. Like, you know, obviously they're going to garner a little bit more professional. Not that, you know, the Bourne movies weren't professional, but I think that everybody got a little comfortable because I think that might be a
100%.
little easier. It is easier to shoot. You know, cut, you know, cut quick, mask everything, and then it's that funny. It's funny we talked about Liam Neeson. Whatever action movie, he did another action movie in that time, and he's flipping over a fence, and there's 9 cuts of him flipping over a fence, and you know, you're like, oh, this is why this is easier.
Yeah.
But then you get to John Wick and what Chad Stahelski was doing in Team, and you understand why that was so important too. And then, you know, somebody that really owned that and took a run at that too, and you know, they have their company now, is the director of The Fall Guy. You know, what they're able to do and paying an homage is why, you know, the stunt community is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, again, like with John Wick, it's just like, you're just blown away with how they're able to one up themselves.
Yep.
Like, it kind of goes to your, like, the comfortability and the complacency point. They don't even feel comfortable and complacent within their own franchise.
Yeah, yep. Because
like, they keep upping themselves.
Because one's great, obviously. One is like a shell shock because like you're waiting for camera cuts and action cuts. You're like, wait a second, like why are we not? Why are we just letting this guy fight hand to hand and we're seeing it? And it takes dedication from everybody too. And then, you know, 2, 3 are still solid, and then you get to 4, and 4 is just like, we're going to do everything possibly that we've ever wanted to do as a stunt community.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. That's yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I think the inception of John Wick kind of not extended the life. It's not like action movies were going to go extinct, but it reinvigorated the genre. And anytime you can get something that does that, especially this late in the game, in the history of time, you know, because like I said, I think action more than most movie genres has those kind of definitive phases. You know what I mean? And I think we're in, you know, you could conceivably call it like the John Wick phase of action movies. Again, I'm curious to see what the next I think the Matrix, you know, thinking about Keanu Reeves, like the Matrix kind of phase was a thing in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like everyone was doing the
it was more performative. It was a bit
performative,
more...
the high wire stuff,
right, exactly.
The slow motion,
right. And then, like I said, Jason Bourne did for what John Wick did. Like, Jason Bourne came along, and it was the counter to that. Jason Bourne was, it felt, you know, gritty. It felt real. It felt like, you know, you felt like you were also in danger. Like, that's how it felt. Yeah. And then, you know, obviously, when complacency happens, that's when it gets a bit dangerous. And then you get to 2014 and John Wick comes out, and then it's another era comes out. It's just like, you know, plant the camera down, teach these actors how to fight, and have them actually fight.
I think the Bond point that you made is really great, too, because the Bond franchise kind of stayed within... It endured, like, that whole time period, and you can see, like, to your point, like, the Bond movies kind of evolve as the genre is also evolving.
Yeah, because I think obviously Skyfall has great action in it. It is the best of Daniel Craig, like, by far it is the best Daniel Craig Bond movie. But that one's more of a little bit more of like a psychological war, like it has a lot of psychological warfare in there, and you know, it's a lot more Bondish than the other movies. But then once you get to Spectre and you start to see you can tell that, you know, they're starting to adapt to the different ways of what these movies and how Hollywood started to change. I mean, to even go further with the point, how many times were we seeing, like, you know, the John Wick team goes onto this project, John Wick team goes onto this project. Like, it kept happening. Yep. And it was like a selling point for these projects, especially the streaming services started using that to their advantage as well, too. Yeah, I think to another kind of franchise that did the, you know, kind of like Bond kind of evolved with the genre. I think the Mission Impossible movies also do that. Yep. When you compare the early era Mission Impossible movies to something like Fallout, which Fallout obviously is great and takes, you know, especially the fight scenes and the action scenes, takes a lot from what the action movies were at the time. Very close quarters, very gritty, very real. And I think the early Mission Impossible movies obviously were predicated on the stunt work and all that stuff. Yeah, because one is like the late era of the 90s, because it came out in 96, where it still had that touch of, you know, I think the 80s and 90s, the blockbuster mentality was still true for action as well. And I mean, what's your favorite action movie of all time? Or what do you think is one of the best? And I mean the actual action. Man, that's a great question. I would say probably
I mean, like, it depends on the era. Like, like John Wick is right now, like, probably my favorite action franchise going. And, it doesn't feel like recency bias to even say that at this point. Like, you've had 4 movies that are just sensational and build one on top of the other. But as far as like those early 80s action movies, I mean, I've always loved Rambo. I've always loved Indiana Jones. And again, Indiana Jones is not something that's predicated on hand-to-hand combat. It's predicated on just like set pieces. And just putting a character, kind of like Die Hard. Like Die Hard also built this mode of just putting a character in an impossible position and seeing how they work themselves out of it.
Yeah. And I'd say, it'll get back to my point, but I look at 2 movies specifically, and I just picked one that's kind of like normal, and it's funny to say for action normal, and then one that's a little bit more fantastical. So I think Terminator 2 is in terms of something that's a little bit more fantastical, I think that is one of the greatest action movies ever made. I think it's phenomenal. It's James Cameron being at above the top of his game. And then less fantastical, just the normal, is Heat. I think Heat and Heat battles itself to the best places that you can ask, because it's also, you're using the actual acting from the film as well, is incredible too. But going further, it's like you look at your eras and then you go down, like there's definers. It's something that you think about for sports as well too, like who's the definers of this era. Like John Wick is the definer of the era that we're in right now. And then, we're going to see what the next era is going to bring, because it feels like, why am I blanking on the director's name for the Fall Guy? But, I feel like that might be, because there's a little bit more of like
David Leitch.
Yeah, David Leitch. Like, I feel like, and obviously he has his own production, or he has his own stunt.
Started on John Wick.
Right, and it's exactly where like that. It comes like David Leitch was with Chad Stahelski, and they were so predicated on the fact that like we need this to feel a little bit more real. Like this needs to feel a little bit more of like it can't be lazy. Like this can't be a lazy venture that we're stepping into. So that might be it might be like a mixture of that with like how Top Gun's been going about things, like the way that Joe Kosinski operates. Like it's going to probably be an amalgamation of that. Might lead into the modern age.
Yeah. No, that's a great kind of opener for how a singular movie sometimes, or a singular project, can sometimes save an entire genre. And I guess my first one is going to be on a similar path of that, and it's honestly less of an objective one and more of a subjective one, and it's how Iron Man 2008 literally saved Marvel.
Yeah, as a whole company. Marvel in its entirety would not be standing if Iron Man didn't work. We talked about it when we talked about Iron Man, when we did our retrospective on Iron Man, about what just a massive gamble this was for them to kind of, after selling off all their most notable, most famous characters to other movie studios, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, and they just kind of looked around and were like, well, we got nothing left. I have nothing left but Iron Man. And they decided, we're going to take one last stab at being viable. We're going to make our own movie studio. We're going to make an Iron Man movie, and then we're just going to see what happens. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we're done. We're sunk. And it turns out to be the linchpin of the single greatest cinematic movie achievement ever. I mean, it's hard to save something any more than that. And just everything about that movie is a risk. You give it to Jon Favreau, who obviously, had put together a couple of decent things at the time. He did Swingers, and then
Elf.
That was my point of like, he comes off of Elf, and then he's given this like this
Iron Man.
Yeah, you're given this universe where they're like, if this fails, we're done. Like, we are eternally done. And I made this point to you a couple of days ago when we were talking. I said I always like watching directors or like universes' first movies, because I like to see what they were doing when they first started, and just to see some of the swings they were taking in Iron Man is always refreshing, because again, there's this real nature to Iron Man. Like there's this like lack of artificial that goes to Iron Man, which is funny because obviously it still has a lot of CGI. Obviously it still has those things, but comparatively, that movie still holds up against movies that came out last year. That movie still holds up. So
yeah, and I mean talking about the chances you're taking, they even took a chance with their casting.
Yeah, yep.
Marvel notably did not want Robert Downey Jr. in this movie, but
Yep.
Jon Favreau was like, no, actually, this movie probably doesn't work without him. Obviously, this is Robert Downey Jr. coming off of a lot of personal trouble. He's just kind of started getting it back together at this point. He had just come off of Zodiac at this point in time, and people were like, all right, maybe he's starting to figure himself out. But now you're going to ask him to be the front man for a $100 million movie, and you're like, can he pull this off?
Yep.
And it just turned out to be, you can also argue that Iron Man 2008 saved Robert Downey Jr. as well. Not just Marvel, it saved Robert Downey Jr. and kind of propelled him to, obviously he wins the Oscar for Oppenheimer, and it's just a culminate, like that was the culmination of what Iron Man helped him do. Right. And I mean, that's, everyone is good in that movie, but he's transcendent.
Right.
It's as close to like a one-man show in that type of movie as you're ever going to get.
Because a lot of times in movies like that, you'll get like a side character that's so lovable. Like, you don't get that anywhere else. Like, who's the closest? Is it Jon Favreau himself is happy? Is that the closest one?
It's that or Pepper.
But I don't even think it's particularly even remotely close. I think it's just, like you said, it is a very one-man show. And
it's just one of those movies where, it's easy sometimes to be like, I could see X actor in that role. There's no shot. Nope. There's no shot that movie works without him. And like I said, it ends up launching the MCU, which is it in terms of like where you could have gone to where you ended up going. It's one of the biggest variances ever. It's absolutely insane.
Right. Let's see what I got. I'm gonna go with what Tom Cruise did for movies himself.
Okay. Make the case.
I mean, again, it's this, what's so funny, and when the king's in the seat, then they garner all the attention. The MCU is the king, right? So not only there's a lot of incredible good that comes out of it, but there's also the other side, and it's my point that I made earlier about complacency. Like, we started to get to a place where Marvel movies just felt complacent, and if that's the king tide that's rolling in all the ships, then everybody's going to try to kind of succumb to that. So it's more of this idea that how hell-bent he is on the experience of the movie. And I mean, coming out of a pandemic too, that's the big piece that I always think about of like, nothing will ever change. And I'm trying to think of other theater experiences that I've had in my entire life. And obviously, Endgame on paper should be number one. I don't know, that when we saw Top Gun Maverick, that was a feeling that I'd never felt something like that in a movie theater before. I'd never, and I'd been, how many movies have I seen? I live in a movie household, so I was seeing a lot of movies in theaters when I was a kid. Maybe movies I was too young to see, which is great. That's really good, and that's that's why I am who I am. But it's something about Top Gun Maverick just was. It's everything you want out of a theater experience itself, and that doesn't come without somebody like Tom Cruise, however vigorous that he was on the set, like I said, he was hell-bent on the fact that this needs to be an actual experience, but it still needs to be good cinema. Like, that's such an important thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you're right in the sense of like, I think with Endgame, I think you kind of expected certain things, like certain reactions, and you kind of expected the audience at large to react a certain way. But with Top Gun Maverick, like I don't think I was expecting the amount of like buy-in from the audience that you got.
Yeah.
We talked about when we talked about that movie, however long ago that was, that when that third act starts and you can feel and see everyone in the theater like lock in.
Yeah. We always joke about it, but there was a woman that was sitting next to us, and obviously in the third act, like you feel, when the mission starts, and again, there's a beautiful simplicity about Top Gun Maverick, but when he's lifted in the carrier and then he picks his team and then he lifts up, like, and then, the engines start going, and it's like, this woman physically sat up in her seat when it happened. I was like, oh shoot, like this is real. Like there's something that's ever so real. And I mean, you look at projects like Mission Impossible Fallout, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, obviously we have Top Gun Maverick, like, it's this nature, and obviously Christopher McQuarrie has a lot to do with this as well too, but it's just this idea of like, if we're going to make a movie, and this is why I love movies, like, why would we ever be lazy about something like this? Why would we ever take a shortcut about something like this? Like, if this needs, like, if, athletes have their championships in this, like, why would we not treat it anything less than that. Like, why could we not have the biggest spectacles? And I mean, my one of my big things is practicals. Like, you know, that's why a show like Andor works. Like, that's why a lot of there's a big point that I'm going to make in a little bit, but practicals can save. They truthfully can. And when things don't feel artificial and they feel real, you know, Guardians 3 also is that movie, you know, operates on a huge practicality standpoint to the fact of, like, you know, the George Lucas, like, build the sets. Like, why are we not building sets? Like, not everything, you know, and obviously a perfect contention is like the Batman where you use the volume, but it's funny because it's, again, your personnel. Like, Greg Fraser used the volume on the Mandalorian and the Batman, and then everybody else wanted to use the volume, and they were like, why isn't the volume working? I was like, because you don't have Greg Fraser. You don't know how to operate in the space.
It's not the tools.
Yeah, it's not the tool, it's the person.
Yeah.
So, it's just, like I said, I think his overwhelmingly, you know, understanding that, like, cinema can save. Like, it's just this thing that's, like, it's something that, you know, it's otherworldly. The idea, it's the only media that consumes all other media, that uses all other media inside of it too. And to understand that, how important this was, especially at the time it was coming out, like, you know, that was the one that cracked the door back open, because it was starting to close and the streamers were taking advantage of it. And he said, no. Like,
not on my watch.
Yeah, not on my watch. The theater is still a place to go. It's a communal place to go.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's a great point also in retrospect, just because of the run that movie went on.
Yep.
Top Gun in particular, like, we're, you know, months down the line and we're like, this movie's still making money, huh? like this is insane. The run that movie went on was just insane, and it's just a testament to your point. Like, it feels like people wanted that movie to happen. Like, they were waiting for a movie like that to, like, galvanize them. And, you know, all props to Tom Cruise that's the movie that he put out and continues to put out.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right. So this one might make some eyes roll, because it feels like a typical answer, but I'm gonna say that HBO's The Last of Us saved the video game adaptation.
Sure, that's a good one. I like that one.
You know, I think that these projects and these properties felt like they had a ceiling, to the point where, like, it was either laughably bad, or it was like
a cult classic almost.
Yeah, like, kind of fun. Like, yeah, that was kind of fun. Like, I kind of felt that way, like, Uncharted. Like, Uncharted was kind of that. Like, it was okay. It wasn't transcendent. It wasn't, you know, remarkable, but it was kind of fun, and it did some things with some characters that I really like. I never saw the Warcraft movie, but the Warcraft movie, by all intents and purposes, does that. Like, yeah, that was Warcraft.
Right.
Like, cool. Even going to the kind of like the mid-2000s with the Tomb Raider movies with Angelina Jolie, like, that was, the Tomb Raider movie was like the first, like, real crack at it, when they're like, we're gonna put a major star in this movie and we're gonna adapt this thing. And the first one's pretty good, and then the other ones are kind of, they fall into that wayside, and then years and years and years, every so often they keep trying one. Assassin's Creed, they put Michael Fassbender in it, they gave it a shot, and it didn't work. The only ones that ever had any type of sustainability were the animated ones. Because obviously those are the easiest ones to do. I mean, Mario made $1 billion. Detective Pikachu went really, really well. But they're animated. You know, Sonic, the second one, when they learned their lesson, and they were like, we're just going to do actual Sonic. They learned their lesson. But then, The Last of Us comes out. And this was, you know, you and I have talked about kind of, I think we've been around long enough that you can chronicle us, like, the inception to the delivery of the project. Like, you know, as soon as we heard Craig Mazin was involved, we were like,
oh,
okay, like, that's a pretty major, like, boost, like, that they're trying something. HBO is gonna do it. You're like, oh, oh, HBO's doing it, huh? And then obviously you get Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, and you're like, okay, like, there's something happening here. And then we got that first trailer, and we were like, this is it. Like, this could be the thing that, like, that makes people take these things seriously, and that's exactly what happened. It turned out they finally cracked the idea behind behind the video game adaptation, and so many of them fell into this trap. Doom fell into this trap. Assassin's Creed fell into this trap. A bunch of them fell into this trap of like, let's just make it feel like the video game, and like that doesn't translate.
Right.
It doesn't translate to a TV show or to a movie. Like Doom had the first person sequence. It just completely takes you out of it. Assassin's Creed obviously had like the animus and the all that stuff, and they tried to make it too video gamey, and like it doesn't work. So The Last of Us was like, no, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this video game property and we're just gonna make a TV show.
Right.
And I think they cracked it. Like they cracked it, and since then we've gotten Fallout. We're getting Ghost of Tsushima with Chad Stahelski.
Right. Yep.
And it just feels like these things have been granted another life where people are like, oh, it's a video game thing, but now people are like,
ooh, it's a video game thing.
Yeah.
Good. Like this actually might end up being good. And I mean, that's a great point about, it goes back to one of the central themes of, I guess, central ideas of, I guess, what this podcast is, one of the big things we have standards, people. And one of those standards is personnel. Your personnel is super important. So, to bring Craig Mazin in was your first win. And, you got him while he was hot too, because obviously he made Chernobyl. And, one thing I love about, his career path is he was doing comedy. Like he did Trainwreck, which on a rewatch that I recently did, that movie's extremely funny. But that movie's kind of a little bit smart as well too. And Craig Mazin's a very smart person. So, to bring him in, one of the big thing is to keep Neil Druckmann there too, because that's what a lot of these adaptations suffer from. They probably send one email to the person that made it, and then they said, "Hey, you got any points?" And they send the email, and they're like, "All right, let's go. We don't need you." But Neil Druckmann directed any of the episodes, right?
He directed, I think, episode. I can't remember. He directed the Left Behind episode.
Right. So. Obviously keeping the person who made the thing, and Sandman's a great point to that as well too. Like the people that worked on the original thing, they probably should have some say if it was successful in the first medium that it was about. So
especially when it's something so cinematic.
Right. Exactly. I'm gonna dip into the comic realm for a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm gonna give you two in the comic realm, but I'm gonna start with Chris Claremont, not only saving. I think Chris Claremont helped save Marvel Comics themselves, and also Chris Claremont brought about a new order for Marvel and comic storytelling as well too. Because at the point where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were with the X-Men, they were done. The X-Men were completely done. There was X-Men, I believe they were getting ready to get canceled if they weren't canceled at the point. Where'd you get up to issue 62 or 63? And it was kind of. It wasn't boring, but it just was run of the mill. Like a kid can pick this up from a comic book store, just read this. That was it. It felt very, throw your comic panel in a newspaper-ish, essentially, for the X-Men. And, what Claremont does is he adds diversity. It's not just that. The biggest true testament of what made that Claremont run special is that it was an understanding of, social issue, which, it doesn't get started without Stan Lee, but it was also character. Like, you bring in Colossus, Banshee, Storm, Wolverine, like, you're bringing in all these classic, Nightcrawler, all these classic X-Men that we know, but, it's pulling stories like God Loves, Man Kills, stories that we get in live action nowadays. It was so important that somebody steps in and it's like, no, comics can be for everybody, and, like, we're going to reflect what's actually going on, these real world things that are going on as well, too, and, some actual, real storytelling, not just this like Magneto pops up, cackles for a little bit, moves a piece of metal, and then the X-Men deal with him. Like, no, we're actually going to deal with real issues that are going on as well too.
Yeah, that's a really great point, especially in the comic book realm of things, where as time evolves, readers also evolve, and I think people at a certain point, people stopped thinking about comics as like these kind of side things or like these goofy things that you just pick up and just have a good time with, but people started to turn to comics and look for real substance. And I think that, to your point, like that kind of helps launch a whole nother subsect of things, right? To where you get stuff like graphic, then you have like the graphic novel starts to become popular.
Don't jump the gun, because that's my second piece.
Ooh. Continue.
Because that second piece is Watchmen. Watchmen absolutely changed comic books for for the better, in my opinion. I mean, you know, Watchmen is the only comic book that's on the Times 100 best-selling books from the 1900s. It's the only one. Think about, you know, I always like to say comics are the dumbest thing on planet Earth. They're stupid, they're idiotic, they're very dumb. But I mean, being serious about it, comics are, you know, I've seen some of the most incredible storytelling come from comics. Like I've seen some just absolutely wonderful odysseys come out of comics, but you know, one stands alone, and it's Watchmen. Watchmen truthfully it made you think about the idea of what a superhero is, because it was extremely black and white until the Watchmen comes out. And you know, that tagline, it's the same thing from Fall, like war never changes. Like, who watches the Watchmen? Like, these are people, like these are actual human beings that, you know, do bad stuff and that are not just morally good. Like, that's not real. That's not a real thing. So, what the Watchmen does, it adds credibility to comics as well too. It makes it something that can 100%. Be like, look at these, you know, they're not just these goofy characters. Like, these are some characters that have real ideologies, and you know, obviously it's a play on you know, the natural order of things. Or you talk about Dr. Manhattan, or it talks about, you know, how to police the situations. Or when you talk about characters like Owlman, and then you get into characters like in Rorschach, and I mean, you know, Ozymandias' plan as well too, of like, these are some actual insane things to even, you know, contextualize. And you know, the only difference is that it's just packaged in a graphic novel. That's the only difference. So, and then I'm gonna add a third point to the piece.
Keep it going. And
that's the New 52 for DC. I think the New 52 absolutely saved DC Comics at that point. Because the New 52 comes out in, I forget what year it was. It was, I think it was either 2009 or 2011, I believe the New 52 started. What's happening in movies during 2008 to 2012? The MCU is just absolutely, you know, getting ready to take everybody. Like, there's no... And, you know, also at that point, DC's sort of in a limbo at that point, because what are we getting during that time? I don't think we have... What did we get? We were getting the end of the Dark Knight trilogy. And, you know, there are some people that aren't fans of the Dark Knight Rises as well, too.
And mind you, that's the only DC movie that's happening.
Oh, there's another DC movie around that time, and that's Green Lantern around that time as well, too. So... look at where DC's at in terms of a lot, and you know, obviously they're animated stuff, but animated is only so accessible to people, and there's such this contrast between the people that watched the animated stuff at that time and the people that were watching the Dark Knight. Yeah. And I feel like there was no middle ground where there is 100% now. So DC goes full revamp, and it's something that DC's not you know, unfamiliar with. Obviously, their crisis events are usually where they try to take these heavy swings, but the New 52's whole ideology was new readers. Like, we need to be able to drop these books and new readers can jump in. You know, it's something that helped me start reading or get back into comics was the New 52. It was like, you know, the Batman stuff. Like, I love where they start with Batman. Like, Batman is already Batman by the time the New 52 comes out. Like, Green Lantern is already Green Lantern, but I'm going to learn some stuff. But it's such an incredible jumping on point. Like, a lot of the stuff that you see out of DC movies come from the New 52. Most of the stuff, if I'm being honest, comes out of the New 52 as well, too. So, it was such this important piece. Just like, you know, your Iron Man, like, without the New 52, I don't know where DC Comics would, and it also helped them as a whole, because you're getting your all-star, which is Jeff Johns at that point. Jeff Johns was like the golden boy of DC at this point after his Green Lantern run. So, you know, hey, not only give him, you know, the reins a little bit, you know, he's also going to take the Justice League as well, too. So all things made sense. And like I said, most of the modern stuff you're getting out of live action, it's because of the New 52,
and it just streamlines everything,
right?
You know, to the point where the readers aren't confused when they're like, "What's Batman doing? What is this Superman story? What is this?" And the writers and the artists themselves also have a streamline to follow. Like, look, we're kind of starting over,
but not really,
and just take this character and take them wherever you want to take them, but here's the foundation. We're giving you the foundation, and then just go.
Right.
And I think that was a really smart idea, because, you know, DC, I think, is more of a perpetrator of this than Marvel is, but, like, it just gets so insane with, like, this character is doing this and this on this Earth and this timeline and this reality, and he's a different character in this thing, and it just, you know, that's why they That's why they did Crisis originally.
Right, yep.
And that's why they did the New 52 the second time, because after Crisis, they cannibalized themselves again.
Yeah, because Crisis on the 86, right? Or 84, Crisis on Infinite Earths comes out in 84, and it's just, it's this, I'm talking,
chaos.
It's chaos. It's absolute, like, and I always, one of my comic hot takes is, like, Crisis is a bit unreadable to some points, because Crisis is so... You can't understand in your mind who and where and why and when and how these people are existing at this point. Like, there's no... Like, logic just gets thrown out the window during Crisis at all points. Because anything can just happen at any point. Like, the fact that the CW was able to even, say what you will, the fact that they were able to take that story and do something with it is just... It's great job.
Yeah.
I don't care what your budget was. I don't care how cheesy it was. Great job trying to wrangle in that I don't want to say mess, because Crisis is still cool, but it was needed. It was needed at the point to, like, sever at that point. But then they did the same thing again after that. They got into it,
themselves.
And then they got to Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis was a little bit less of, like, it was a little bit less. Yeah. And then you get into Final Crisis, and you're like, oh, Lord Jesus, like, this is too much to handle again.
Yeah.
And then, like we said, like, the New 52 was a perfect spot to be like, these characters... And you know what DC's advantage is? Always something I say about... I feel like these movies should never struggle. DC's advantage is, I go on the street, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, people will probably know who those three are. If they never touch the comic book, they're going to know who they are. The Flash is the fast guy. Green Lantern might be a little bit more difficult, but, like, their core characters, like, Marvel doesn't have that without the MCU. Like, their core characters besides Spider-Man, Hulk, Wolverine, you probably don't know, but, like, DC, that's Superman. Like, that's... Yeah. I can go any era of time since Superman incepted, like, oh, that's Superman. Like, Batman's the same. Like, oh, that's Batman. And, like, that's Wonder Woman. Like, those are the three that you hold firm on. So, we'll take the core of what those characters are, and we'll let these writers do what they want a little bit on these. Yeah,
that's a great point. Speaking of the CW, that was going to be my next one. Arrow Season 5 saved not just that show, but potentially that entire universe.
Yes.
Because Arrow Season 4 was a train wreck.
Yes. To the point where Stephen Amell even admitted that that's the season that is just... we
don't talk about that.
We don't talk about Bruno. It was a horrible mess.
We don't talk about Season 4. They completely lost the plot and the feel for why that show was so good. What they ended up doing with Arrow Season 4 was they turned it into a CW show.
Yep.
They made it about, like, the relationship drama, and they tried to make it a little more lighthearted, a little more fun, a little more jokey, quippy. Yeah. I remember watching the first episode of Season 4 after, and Oliver's retired. He's living in, like, whatever neighborhood that was, like Funtown, USA, or wherever,
in suburbs, USA,
wherever he was, and the color palette is so much brighter. Obviously, Felicity Smoke, you have failed this omelet. And then Season 4 just turns into this. They built the whole mystery box of, like, someone died, and you don't know who died, like, the whole season until, like, you get to the reveal. They introduced magic. In Arrow Season 4. Yep.
Which is just so not what that show is. It's just... No. And, the broader spectrum and the broader stroke of what happened on Season 4 was just such a portrayal of what you had worked for. And, to the point about credibility, like, Arrow had the biggest, in the universe itself, had the biggest uphill battle, because, again, the king of this situation... it's funny how much of this bounces off the MCU, but, like, you have this universe that's fully fledged and fully realized, and then you get to Arrow, and it's like, you're the joke at this point. Like, any way you want to split it, you're the joke, because your budget's not even a percentage of what they have. You're dealing what the network you're dealing with is like, this is like the teen to young adult to single mom like network at this point. Like, you're coming off Dawson's Creek, like, you're coming off these shows, and you're like, like, we can't afford to do this. And then, like, especially when you get into Arrow Season 2, it's like, that's when you're like, okay, like, this is starting to become, like, decently credible. Like, this is becoming watchable, and then it gets good, and then it gets very good. And then you get to something like Arrow Season 4, and it's just like, why are we betraying everything that made us what we were?
Yeah, it just, like I said, it introduces magic. The cast gets expanded like tenfold.
Yeah, and it just feels like everybody's phoning it in at that point.
Yep. But then from out of the darkness comes the light. You get Arrow season 5, which everyone said, Stephen Amell included, this was going to be it. Season 5 was going to be the end. Mm-hmm. And then season 5 happened. And I'll never forget it. The first episode of season 5 is almost like a direct refutation of Arrow season 4. Down to the point like they rehash almost beat for beat the sequence in the pilot where he gets tied up. He, does the bit with the thumbs and he breaks out and he grabs the guy and he's like, no one can know my secret. And he snaps the guy's neck. And that was the writer's room letting us know, like, we're going back to our roots.
We're so back.
We're so back.
We've never been more back.
We're going back to our roots. And it propelled another 3 seasons after that, just off the strength of what Arrow season 5 did.
You know what Arrow does very well, and I think it does it the best in the entire MCU, in the entire Arrowverse? When their villains are good, their seasons are good. I will actually die on that hill. When the villain's good, the season's good. I mean, give me any random season. Don't give me any random season from the Arrowverse. Doesn't matter.
Flash season 4.
Perfect. So
that's why I said that.
Right. So Flash season 4 is I think it's the worst season of the Flash, only because the back half seasons of the Flash were in the COVID days. So I think it was a little tougher for them to get everybody back and everybody on board, and they had to kind of take some shortcuts. But the Flash season 4 didn't have an excuse. Like, there was no excuse. And while I think the Thinker himself is a good concept, because again, like, you're not going to use speed to beat me this time. I feel like the writers weren't smart enough to write a smart character like that. They weren't smart enough to do that.
Yeah.
So it turned out, they started to get outran by this character that they didn't know what to do with. Like, it's the same thing that you do for like your Supermans. Like, when there's not somebody when somebody doesn't know how to write that character, usually they run away from you. Like, they run out of your hands. It's something that Tarantino says, like, I'm only giving the foundation for what my characters, essentially my characters should be writing themselves. Like, I should be on autopilot by that point. And I should let their actions of what I set up for them be the ones that carry. It shouldn't be me trying to outsmart what's going on. And I feel like the Thinker it's funny, like the Thinker outsmarted the writers of Flash season 4, which turned out, a villain I thought was going to be good, turned into one of the
worst.
And a great performance. And a great performance turned out ended up being one of the worst villains out of the Arrowverse. And then you contrast that with Arrow season 5. You get one of the best villains because it's personal. The performance is great. I still don't care what you put my man in now. I don't trust him.
She-Hulk was a perfect example of that.
I was waiting for it. I was waiting for him to do something horrible, and he just was a great guy. That was it. So yeah.
Prometheus was...
Same thing for Abbott Elementary. I'm watching Abbott Elementary, and I'm waiting for it to happen. And I'm waiting, and it won't... I forget what his name is. But I'm waiting for it to happen, and it just won't go.
Yeah, man.
He's such a perfect counter for Oliver as well too. If Deathstroke was like your Lex Luthor to Oliver, then like Prometheus was like your Bizarro. Like, that's like, this is the twisted version of what you could have came out of.
Yeah, I think everything about it was set up. It was so set up. It was set up so perfectly.
The vigilante twist was great too, because you obviously, and in the comics, his character was vigilante. That's why that twist worked even well, because you're nerds and you think the Arrow writer room, because this is like the era where all your new rock stars and like all your started to really start popping off. So you think the writers room used that to the advantage?
Yes.
And they were like, all these theory people are going to just run rampant with one idea of like, this has to be vigilante.
Yeah, they planted vigilante and Adrian Chase
at the same time
in the confines.
And they had multiple times where he would leave. I'm like, I need to go, and then vigilante would immediately show up. You're like, yeah, we're just waiting. All we're waiting for at this point is the people in universe to learn, and then they just didn't do that.
Yeah, he ends up being Prometheus, and it's some of the best work that show's ever done. Was in season 5, and
one of the best finales as well too out of the entire Arrowverse. That finale is phenomenal.
That finale is one of the best episodes of that universe that you're ever going to get. They never quite reached that height again with season 6, 7, or 8. But I mean, as far as like resurrection and recovery of a of a universe. Because if Arrow falls after season 4,
you're done.
The whole thing is toast.
Yeah, the only thing that would have survived was The Flash. The Flash would have been the only one, because The Flash, after season 4, was on season 2, which season 2 of The Flash, you can argue, you could split hairs between season 1 and season 2 being the best.
Yeah, but, I mean, if Arrow falls, you lose...
Black Lightning doesn't get made at that point. Supergirl probably gets, at that point, coming from CBS to CW, like, you could probably chop that one as well, too, and save.
Legends of Tomorrow probably falters.
Tomorrow's is done.
And you lose all that. And then you lose what, obviously one of the best things about that CW universe is the interconnectivity. Like, if Arrow falls, like, that's it. And then,
like,
you lose all that interconnectivity.
And then forward thinking, you don't get Superman and Lois as well, too. And that was probably the biggest one that you needed out of all. In the modern age, like, that's the biggest one you needed out of everything.
So Arrow season 5 really gave them enough legs to get to season 8, to get to Crisis, and to send everything off a little more nobly than perhaps it would have if it just falls after season 4.
And it's like solid storytelling overall, because if that fails, then it's the main character point that I talk about, like structuring Crisis to follow to be like Oliver's swan song made it even more watchable. You know what I mean? Like, by the time you get to Crisis, it's also the Arrow season 8's finale is that and Crisis are hand in hand at that point. So Oliver and Barry are essentially, and that's what you want. Why would I want Oliver, Barry, and Kara as the main, because that's the three that are holding the network up.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I guess we'll each do one more.
Sure. Go ahead.
No, you go. I just went. I did Arrow.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to go?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to do a fun one. Fast 5 save Fast and Furious.
I loathe the fact that you're right. You're absolutely right.
Just both in terms of the franchise itself and the style of movie that it was trying to be. Fast 5 is the hinge point of, these are just street racing movies too. All right.
Because Fast 1 and 2 are like, Fast 1, 2 and Tokyo Drift these are street racing movies, and then Fast and Furious. Yep. Fast and Furious 4 was like, no, we're secret agents now, and everybody's like, huh?
And there's like a little bit of realism, and a little bit of like stuff going on.
It's so crazy. We made the point about like the action point might have been the best take we took out of this whole thing, because you look at, what I compare that to? I compare it to a little bit of Mission Impossible 3, just the way that the movie feels, because it's that the mid 2000s has a very distinct feel about the movies.
Yeah.
So Fast and Furious also deals with that feel of the movie. So it was like this, gritty action star that's, again, closer camera angles and really personal, like get up and close, like all those things were happening too. So, and then you get the Fast 5, and Fast 5 is the best. It's the best one.
It's the best one.
It's the unironically best one, because the ironically best one is Fast X.
Yeah. Fast X is Fast 5. Fast X is paying for the sins of Fast... Or Fast 5 is paying for the sins of Fast X.
Right.
Because if you don't get Fast 5, you don't get Fast X.
Right.
But you have to get Fast 5 to get 6, 7, and 8.
Right.
So, obviously Fast 5 just goes full send into... These are just straight action movies now.
Yeah, yep.
All of our characters are indestructible.
But again, to the credibility point, I guess that's super important to make sure you had credit. Like, Fast 5 is the most credible Fast and Furious. Like, it's the one where, like, you could throw that on and, like, rank it against action movies. You're like...
It's a good-looking movie.
It's pretty... I'm like, okay, like, this is...
Justin Lin did his thing with those movies.
He did. I thought he did a very good job. And then, bringing in The Rock as well, too, and also, I don't know if people are going to want to hear this. I think The Rock needed that Fast and Furious movie, too, at that point where he was. Because that came out in 2012, if I'm not mistaken.
2011,
2011, so... What was The Rock doing in 2011, around that time?
2011.
The early 2010s.
I mean, I don't know. Nothing. I don't know if he's doing anything notable.
Now The Rock is still The Rock, but I just think that...
Well, Fast 5 is what launches him into being what he's known as now, which is the most profitable movie star in the world.
Right, yep.
That's what Fast and Furious...
And he's also the most Fast and Furious looking person. So I think...
he's the perfect foil for Toretto. in these movies.
Because he's somebody you can also root for, because you know he's not the definitive villain of this thing, but he's somebody that's an antagonistic force. So it's something that, it's just, like you said, it's a perfect counter for Vin Diesel.
Yeah, he shows up, and it's just, it's like a different injection happens. And then, I mean, they just went full send with they brought everyone in. Like, everyone's in these now.
It's like the team-up nature started to feel like a team-up, actually, so... You know, you get everybody in here as well, too. So 2000, we'll say 8. From 2008, so The Rock does Get Smart, he does Race to Witch Mountain, he does Tooth Fairy, he does The Other Guys, which he's really good in. Right, but it's...
Him and Sam Jackson are in it for 10 minutes.
Well, right, exactly.
He does Faster, and then he does Fast 5.
So, at that point in his career, you know what I mean? Like...
I mean, all these movies are getting made just because he's in them.
Right, exactly. So... I think this was the best thing that he ever could have done for his career. Like, let me get into a franchise, but this movie also needs to be something that's watchable. It can't just be like a stupid action. Like, this needs to feel... I need to get a feel out of something out of this.
It turns him into the movie star.
Right. This is the modern age of The Rock. Doesn't come without Fast and Furious.
Much to Vin Diesel's chagrin.
Yep. Not on Fast X, though. He knew... Listen, at some point, you gotta bite your tongue sometimes and be like, I need you.
Vin Diesel... What's going on in Fast 6? Vin Diesel was by himself the whole movie.
He was. But then they already did that in Fast 8. Or Fast 9? I don't know, man.
Yeah, and then, like I said, like, it starts to become... And then they do what John Wick did, but for the worse. They're like, how do we one-up ourselves in all these movies? Then there's a submarine, then there's a bomb rolling down the hill in Rome, then there's whatever Jason Momoa was doing in Fast X.
Yeah.
And now we're getting another one. And The Rock, and he's back. It's come full circle. The Rock's back. I ain't hard to find, you some bitch.
There's never been better cinema than that, in my opinion. They peaked with that.
The most obvious. Is there a more obvious post-credit cameo than in anything ever, other than Hobbs at the end of Fast X?
That was insane. But like also, a little piece of you is still like, there's no way, right? Like after like that's where like real world you is there, and you're like, nah, like surely he hates him, right? Like surely there's like actual hatred here, so like he wouldn't do this. And then they did it.
Hatred so strong that he got his own spinoff.
Yep.
Crazy. All right, what's your
directed by
David Leitch? What's your last one?
So my last one is it's a studio themselves.
Okay.
That I think the studio saved indie filmmaking.
Oh.
And that's A24. A24
Wonderful.
Absolutely. It's to the point where you go on YouTube now and people are like, get the A24 look. And I was like, that's not what that means. That's not even close to what that means. But
yeah.
It's almost like the revolution of A24 not only saved, indie movies, it kind of saved Hollywood from itself. So my point being is, again, the king and it's the tide that we keep going to is the MCU. So the MCU's doing its thing, and A24 has been around since 2009 or 2011, something like that. A24 has been, and obviously A24 started to get big in the mid 2010s. Like once you hit like 2014, 2015, that's when A24 started to become like a household, like, oh, that's an A24 movie. Just like how we would say like this is like, this is like a Warner Brothers movie, or this is an A24 movie. So A24, what it did is it's quality control, and it's not only is it quality control, the most important thing is like A24 is like, we're going to pick up the movie, but we don't have any say in what your movie is. Go make your movie. just go make your movie. We don't care about anything that you're going to do, as long as you don't harm anybody or do anything. Like, go make your movie. And it's one of the most inspirational pieces. And it's my point that I keep saying is like, I feel like I grew up with A24. Like, so the older I got, it's like the studio that's there is so predicated on like, hey, like, here's your project, here's this thing, here's this indie-esque movie. Like, they feel so real and they feel so personal. And it's like, now it's to the point of like, if you're like a small-time filmmaker, like, before you probably would have been like, I need my movie to get made by Warner Brothers. Now it's like, I need my movie to get made by A24. So it just adds a realm of like, I can make this an actual possibility of the thing that I want to do. And, just look at the movies that they've produced. It's insane. And then you get up to now, like the last 2 years, 3 years, like one of their movies has, how many movies of theirs has been nominated for Best Picture? They won a Best Picture out of them.
And that's the point. Like, it all culminates with Everything Everywhere All at Once, is where the whole, like, everything that you're saying that's the culmination of it, which I think is a really neat bow on the journey. Is like, they started here with, doing these little, like, giving a space for independent work, and then little by little, year by year, ascend, and then it culminates with everything everywhere all at once. And now like you've arrived.
Yeah, they have
as a studio.
I mean, for you, I'm gonna remix that. The one that for them that was it was Moonlight. Moonlight was the biggest win that they'd had because at that point in 2016, that's when people were starting to learn truthfully what A24 was, and then this movie, and then look at 2016 as a whole. Think about like. Captain America Civil War comes out in 2016. I think 2016 was a big comic book year as well too. And like, Batman vs Superman comes out in 2016. So like these big titans are fighting in the sky, right?
Yeah.
And like there's just this one man that's there with like it's the meme of like the huge titan in the sky and the man with the sword. Like A24 was the man with the sword of like, I don't need to win this in like I don't need to win the war, or I don't need to win this battle. Like I just need to play the long game a bit. And also, it's the long game. It's mind your business. Like we don't have anything to do with anything like that. Like our sole purpose is just making good films. Like that's all we're not making a product. We're making art. Like art is our number one top priority. And for me, in my opinion, it culminated in 2016. I mean, and then you put it up against something like La La Land as well too. And like, the infamous, Moonlight you guys won. Like what a night. Like, I mean, a movie that cost what, $1 million, I think, in Moonlight, You bring in Mahershala Ali, who goes on to win an Oscar. You bring in Barry Jenkins as well too, who this was his second feature that he had made at that point as well too, because a second official feature, and now he's a Best Picture winner and somebody that now Disney gets to do Lion. And like you look at the Mufasa movie and you physically look at it. Remember when we watched the trailer? I was like, there might be a little something in this. There was a close on Mufasa where he was like turning, and I was like, wait a second.
How do you get the line to act like that?
Wait a second. But then you get now, and it's like you get movies like Civil War, like, and the budget starts to raise a little bit, but it's never portrayed itself, and I don't think it's ever going to portray itself. I mean,
I agree.
Some of these movies are just absolutely incredible. I mean, Past Lives nominated for an Oscar. Greta Gerwig wins for Lady Bird. Like some of these movies, like. You put them up against these huge studio movies, like, they're oftentimes better than these huge studio movies. So, and again, you look at movies as a whole, and, like, again, I think the number one thing that A24 did, it's the art versus the product. There's no product here. It's just art. And it's, like, in a world that's so product-focused, and, like, we need the next thing. It's funny that we counter what we just said. Like, we need the next thing to connect to that doesn't exist. Like, this is just a studio that's just, like, and now getting into next year, like we're getting, Spike Lee, like now these big directors are like, make sure I get that A24 banner on top of there too. Like Spike Lee with Denzel is making a movie for A24. Like that's incredible just to see where they started and see where they
The Rock is doing an A24 movie.
The Rock's doing an A24 movie. I mean, like the filmography is just, it's absurd. Like it's just these movies, when you look at them now versus if you think about it from like 10 years ago, it's like, oh, that movie has the A24 banner. It has to be good. Like that's how people started to think.
Yep, and that's
99% of the time it's true.
That's the trajectory that you want for like a studio. Like you want eventually, you don't want to have to seek out all these high profile directors and movie stars. They're going to seek you out, and that's what we're seeing now with A24, which I think is really really cool.
Favorite A24 movie?
Ever?
Sure.
Man,
I'll give you a second to look at the list.
No, I'm just trying not to do like the recency bias thing. Man, I really like the Iron Claw.
Yeah, Iron Claw was...
And that one's like, that's in my bag. Like, I'm a pro wrestling guy. Like, I knew the story of the Von Erich family. Sure. Like, and that movie, like, I don't think, it's funny to say, like, I don't think another studio could have done that story.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's, another studio does that. It's probably a lot more,
over dramatic.
Exactly. To the point where it doesn't need, like...
Like, the Iron Claw is haunting.
Yeah, exactly. It's got this, like... It's got this aura behind it where it's just, like... it's nothing ever when Mikey dies in that movie. That's where I was like, oh, so this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna give you. I mean, I'm not gonna. It's Moonlight because that's the movie that made me want to make movies. Because at first I knew I was gonna write, but I didn't know I wanted to actually physically make movies, and then Moonlight was the one that switched that for me. I'm gonna give you a most underrated one because I feel like that's a better approach for me, and that's Joaquin Phoenix and Come On, Come On. I think that movie is phenomenal. It's comforting. It's very simple. It's just very. It's not somber. It's just this nice little movie that doesn't like. There's no sky beam. Like sometimes great movies, there's no sky beam. Like it's just this small movie about, an uncle and, that, gets a chance to get a new look on life after he gets to take care of his nephew and kind of their trials and tribulations as a family. It's very simple. And that's A24 as a whole. It's just a very, obviously in the early days they were dipping a lot into horror. And again, if I can go further with the port, A24 also kind of helped horror a lot be credible because it was to the point where by the time Hereditary had came out, like people were screaming, why was Toni Collette not nominated for Best Actress? Like that's kind of crazy that she wasn't. So horror was at a point where it was like, oh God, another stupid, here's another Conjuring, or you know what I mean? Like, but now it's like, it's not just horror. It's like these weird, disgusting, bone-chilling, like skin-crawling horror movies. But they're not just horror movies. They're like they make you actually think about things. And like if I really want to think about it, like Ex Machina, I can repackage as a horror movie if I wanted to. So this studio, shout out A24, the 2-time Oscar winner of Best Picture studio, A24,
and likely more in the future.
And likely more. Yep,
definitely.
Saddest A24 movie. They got some sad ones.
Yeah, they do have some sad ones.
Maybe we'll do an A24 episode one day.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It's good studio.
I mean, again, it's hard not to say. I mean, Iron Claw is
just very sad,
horrifying,
very sad. I'm gonna say After Sun with Paul Mescal. That movie had me just distraught for days. Like I didn't to the point I didn't even want to get out of my bed for days after I watched that movie. That movie just had me destroyed after I watched that movie. Shout out A24. Past Lives is great too. I'm looking at like the full list and like I'm just looking at them like these movies are incredible. Like this is actually nuts that this all comes from the same studio.
I mean, Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems is incredible as well too. A really underrated one from the last couple of years was Causeway. I quite enjoyed, and that was Jennifer Lawrence coming back to acting because she took a little bit of a break because I think she had a child, and she came back, and I thought she was incredible. Her and Brian Tyree Henry had great chemistry as well. Your boy Bo Burnham with 8th Grade, and that's nothing the studio does very well is giving these chances and these not these chances, but like these like here to like you know what I mean like here you go to these directors and these first time directors as well too. I think that's awesome.
Agreed. That was fun.
It was a good time.
There's so many other things that like I could talk about. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll do a part 2 to this.
Right, like X-Men First Class is a good one that comes to mind.
House of the Dragon I had on here. Yep. Thor Ragnarok, obviously. Yeah, yep. Like there's so many we could dive into. So maybe we'll table this and do a part 2. That'd be fun. That's it. We're done. We're done for the week. That was a good chat. Good chat. I always like these episodes. So that being said, you can follow us on Twitter at ProjectINF_pod. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram
at the Project Infinite Pod.
Next week, who knows? Who's to say? We are maybe. I don't know. It's probably a little early for a Deadpool episode.
Sure, we can wait a little bit for that. But yeah, we'll have some fun next week. Yeah, or maybe we won't.
Maybe we won't.
Maybe we'll talk about The Whale next week.
That'll be fun.
No, it wouldn't. It'd be great to talk about Brendan Fraser, but like to talk about the movie wouldn't be fun.
No, that wouldn't be fun.
It'd be sad.
It'd be real sad. Yeah, so we'll figure it out. Until then, from the...
Careful, man.
Man, I don't even know where to go with this one. We did so many things this week. From the Ben Mendelsohn of the podcast.
I like it.
Right?
I like it.
Right?
I just watched Place Beyond the Pines a couple of days ago, too. Love that guy. Love Ben Mendelsohn, man.
1 million scrolls.
1 million scrolls? Were you up in your space station? The most soft. We were down here as your errand boys. You're not talking to the cops, are you, mate? Love Ben Mendelsohn.
Love Ben Mendelsohn, friend of the show.
Yeah, best friend of the show.
But we're gonna go because we got a House of the Dragon to watch.
Yes. And most importantly, happy birthday, Rob.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday. Here's to 1,000 more birthdays, because you are immortal at this point.
That'd be nice. But thank you.
Happy birthday, kiddo.
We're almost what, 3 years into this thing?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's crazy. Well, we will see you next week for yet another episode. I almost got my Dragon Ball Z voice next time on the Project Infinite podcast.
Previously.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Peace.